Nobody talks about the middle bit. The start has energy, the finish is a story, but the middle, the long stretch where nothing dramatic happens, and progress is invisible, that's the part people quietly abandon. And it's the only part that works. Welcome to Let's Talk About Confidence. I'm John M. Walsh. This is Season 3, Nervous Not Broken. And we're near the end of the season's journey. Over the last 11 episodes, we've talked about why you feel nervous, what the nervous system is doing, why modern life makes it harder, and how to recover when it goes wrong. Today I want to talk about the part in between all of those events. The ordinary Tuesday, the week where nothing dramatic happens, the stretch where you're showing up, doing the work, feeling okay, but not transformed, and starting to wonder whether any of it is going anywhere. The boring middle. It's where most people stop, and, as I want to show you today, it's where almost all of the real work gets done. If you've been with me since Season 1, you'll know we touched on this territory back in the second episode, when we first talked about what the process of building confidence actually looks like and feels like from the inside. We're coming back to it today, but through a different lens, because I think there's something specific about this moment, the moment just before you give up, that we didn't quite get to then, and it's what I most want to leave you with today. Let me start with something you've probably felt, but might not have named. Think about the last time you tried building something, a habit, a skill, new way of handling yourself. It starts with energy, excitement, there's a decision, a plan, maybe the first action. Something shifts, you feel it. You go to the first meeting, you make the call you've been avoiding, you join in, you start it, say the thing you've been sitting on, and it works. Not perfect, but well enough, and the evidence says you can do this. Then a week passes, then two, the initial energy fades, nothing catastrophic happens, but nothing dramatic happens either. You're doing it steadily, but the buzz of the beginning is gone, and the satisfaction of the finish is nowhere in sight. You're just in it. And at some point in that stretch, a thought arrives. Am I actually making progress? I've watched this pattern play out more times than I can count. The graduate who started going to the big weekly team meeting instead of finding an excuse to be elsewhere. The manager who began calling people rather than defaulting to messages. The salesperson who committed to asking for the business at the end of every conversation instead of hoping the client would come to them. In every case, first few weeks went well. Evidence was collecting, confidence was shifting, and then around week 4 or 5, the same thing happened. The energy levelled off, the early wins stopped feeling remarkable, and the doubt crept back in. Was it still working? They couldn't tell. And for a lot of them, that uncertainty was enough. And without a clear answer, the dropout happens. Not from failure, not from a knock, from a lack of visible evidence that any of it's working. That quiet abandonment is what this episode is about, because what you stopped in the middle was almost certainly working. You just couldn't see it yet. Here's a paradox at the heart of the boring middle. And once you understand it, you'll stop misreading the silence. Changing the nervous system and in confidence doesn't happen in a straight line that you can observe day by day. It happens in layers, mostly beneath the surface. And then, if you keep going, it shows up all at once. The researchers who study cell development call it the plateau of latent potential. You're building, consolidating, wiring things in. Nothing's visible is happening. Then one day, something clicks and you're noticeably different. And you can't quite point to the moment it changed because it didn't change in a moment. It changed in all those unremarkable days that you almost gave up. Think about learning to drive. For weeks, you're consciously managing every single thing at once. Clutch, mirror, speed, position, indicators. And it feels effortful and awkward. And you wonder if you'll ever feel comfortable behind the wheel. Then one morning you arrive somewhere and you realise you don't remember the last 10 minutes of the journey. It went automatic, not because of one lesson, but because all of them stacking silently until the skill dropped below the level of conscious effort. Confidence works the same way. The social situation that used to cost you 3 days of rehearsal and 2 days of recovery starts one day to cost you an hour. Not because of one brave evening, but because of all the previous ones gradually teaching the alarm that threat never materialised. It's working. You just can't see it working yet. The researchers who study expert performance, people like Anders Ericsson, whose work on deliberate practice underpins almost everything we know about skills are built. He found something that surprises most people. The period of greatest learning is almost never the period that feels most productive. The feeling of flow, of things clicking and coming easily, is often a sign that you're consolidating ground you've already gained. The grinding, effortful, this doesn't feel like it's working stretch is frequently where the real acquisition is happening. The middle feels harder because it is harder. That's the mechanism, not a malfunction. The boring middle is not a sign that nothing is happening, it's a sign that the visible, dramatic bit is over and the deep, lasting bit has begun. The trouble is, it feels exactly the same as it would feel if you'd stopped making progress entirely. So the skill is learning to tell the difference, and the way to tell the difference is almost always this: are you still showing up? Because showing up in the middle, but there's no buzz, no visible reward, is the whole thing. That's where the others stop. It's where you don't. I want to stay here for a moment because a specific point in the boring middle that I think deserves its own name. I'm going to call it the threshold. I want you to recognise it because it is the most dangerous and the most important moment in the whole process. Here's what happens. You've been doing the work, showing up, taking small steps, not quitting, and then often somewhere around week 3 or 4, or month 2 or 3, if the change you're making is a bigger one, the feeling of wanting to stop almost becomes overwhelming. Not because something went wrong, nothing went wrong. It's just a wave of flatness, of doubt, of what's the point of this, that arrives without warning, and it feels completely conclusive, like a clear-eyed assessment that none of it's working. That feeling is not what it claims to be. And this is the piece I most want you to hold on to. What we know from neuroscience and from the study of behavioural change is that the consolidation of new patterns in the brain happens largely between practice, during rest, often during sleep, rather than during the practice itself. You do it, then your brain does the wiring quietly afterwards, without telling you. Which means there are stretches where the change has already been neurological and it's in there, it's real, but it hasn't yet shown up in how you feel or how you behave. The new wiring exists, the old felt experience hasn't updated yet. This is where it gets important in exposure therapy. The approach we know that works for fear and avoidance, that's a well-documented pattern where the urge to quit actually peaks right at the threshold of the change taking hold. The old system is one last push before it gives way. It's not evidence that the work isn't working. It may be the closest thing there is to evidence that it is. The feeling that says give up now is very often arriving at the exact moment when giving up would cost you the most. So if you're in that place right now, if you're reading or listening to this from inside a flat, purposeless, what's the point stretch, I want to ask you one question before you decide to stop. Not how long have you been going, not is this working yet, just this. Are you at the threshold? Because if you are, the work's already done. Your brain's already changed. What you're waiting for is your felt experience to catch up. The only way to get there is through. It'd be unfair to just say keep going without acknowledging why the middle is genuinely difficult, because it is, and for specific reasons worth naming. The first is that we're wired for feedback. Your nervous system learns by consequence. Do something, feel the result, update. That's the cycle. In the beginning, the feedback's clear. You were nervous, you acted, the thing went okay, your brain takes the note. In the finish, the feedback's obvious, it worked, you did it. But in the middle, the feedback signal gets quiet. You show up, you do it, nothing bad happens. Nothing spectacular happens, and the brain doesn't know quite what to file it under. Without a clear signal, motivation drifts. The second's comparison. We've come back to this all season, and it matters here too. The middle looks like nothing from the outside. And other people's social media, other people's career trajectories, other people's apparent ease, all of it makes your unremarkable Tuesday feel like falling behind. You're not falling behind. You're in the middle. Everyone who's ever built anything real has a middle that looked exactly like yours. They just didn't post it. The third's identity. In the beginning, there's a story to tell about yourself. I'm doing this now. In the finish, there's a story too. In the middle, you're neither the person who just started nor the person who made it. You're in between identities, and that's uncomfortable. In betweenness is one of the loneliest feelings a person can have. You've left the old shore, the new one isn't visible yet. And without a story to tell yourself, the temptation to go back to the familiar one, the old you, is so strong. This is worth sitting with because it connects to something we talked about back in episode 7 about the mask, about the person who can't admit they're struggling. The middle is one of the places that mask feels most necessary because the middle looks like weakness from the outside. I've been doing this for months and I'm not there yet. That sounds like a confession, but it isn't. It's just an honest account of what building something real feels like from the inside. The people who drop the mask long enough to say that out loud, they find more often than not that the person listening says something like, me too. The middle's universal. It just feels solitary because no one talks about it. Understand these three things, the feedback drought, the comparison trap, the identity gap, doesn't make the middle easy, but it makes it understandable. And a thing you can name is a thing you can handle. Before we get to what helps, it's worth naming a couple of things that don't, because very tempting in the middle, and they make it harder. The first wrong cure is the grand reset. In the middle, when nothing seems to be working, the impulse is to scrap everything, start again. New plan, new approach, new version of what you're trying to do. And sometimes that's right, but most of the time, it's just the middle doing what the middle does, making you feel like you need to start over, when what you need is to keep going. The restart feels like progress, but it sends you back to the beginning, back to the visible energy and the early wins, and you'll be in the middle again within a fortnight. Some people spend years cycling through beginnings and never quite make it to the other side. The second wrong cure is the big dramatic gesture. When progress feels invisible, the instinct is to do something large and visible. Sign up for a massive event, make a bold public declaration, raise the stakes in a way that forces your hand. And occasionally, that's exactly right, but more often, it's a way of recreating the feeling of a beginning, the buzz, the energy, the visible movement, without doing the unglamorous work that the middle requires. Drama's not the same as progress, and a life spent in dramatic fresh starts is a life that never quite gets to where the start was pointing. The boring middle doesn't want a grand gesture. It wants you moving through it, day by day, try by try. So what moves the needle? None of it's glamorous, that's kind of the point. First shift is the most important. Stop measuring the destination, start measuring the showing up. Most people measure the progress against where they want to end up. And in the middle, the gap between here and there looks enormous and discouraging. So change the unit of measurement. Question's not how far do I still have to go, it's did I show up today? That's it. A yes to that question is progress, regardless of how visible it feels. A day where you showed up despite feeling flat, despite seeing no reward, despite having every reason not to bother to, is worth more than any day of dramatic effort at the beginning because it's harder to do and your brain knows the difference. Second is to make the process the identity rather than the outcome. We talked earlier about the identity gap in the middle, the feeling of being neither the old person nor the new one. The way through that gap isn't to rush to the other side. It's to make the showing up itself the identity. Not I'm trying to become a confident person, but I'm the sort of person who does this even when it's not working. That shift is subtle but powerful. It means you no longer need visible progress to keep going, because keeping going is no longer a means to an end. It's just what you do. Paradoxically, it's the people who make the process their identity rather than the outcome who tend to catch the outcome, because they never needed the outcome to keep going. The third is to find the tiny signal in the noise. The middle feels like nothing's happening. If you look closely enough, something always is. The conversation that used to cost you a day to recover from now takes an hour. The meeting you used to dread, you still dread, but you dread it less. The thing you normally cancel, you did cancel this time. These are not nothing. These are the compound interest of confidence. They're too small to see perhaps day by day, unmistakable when you measure it month by month. Which is why the evidence log we've talked about all season earns its biggest return, not in the beginning, when the wins are obvious, but in the middle, when you've got weeks of entries to look back on, and you can see the distance you've covered, even if you couldn't feel it at the time. The fourth is to lower the bar. The fourth is to lower the bar when you need to, without guilt. This might be the most compassionate and least talked about tool in the whole of confidence building. Some weeks, the full version isn't possible. Life's heavy, energy's low. So do less, but do something. Show up at a diminished capacity, because the brain doesn't distinguish between a brilliant performance and a half-hearted one when it comes to updating the threat. It just notes, we were okay. The streak of showing up matters far more than the quality of any individual showing up. Quietly, slightly reluctant, counts just as much as a triumphant one. And the fifth is one that many people won't do, but it's worth saying. Tell someone where you are. The middle's a private struggle for most people because there's nothing impressive to report. I'm in the middle. I'm keep going. I'm not there yet. But sharing the boring bit with one person who's genuinely on your side does two things. It makes the middle real. You've named it and witnessed, which makes it easier to keep going. And it tends to surface a reflection you can't give yourself, that the progress is more visible to someone watching than it is to you living it. You're always a poor judge of your own momentum. A good witness can see what you can't. I've had this conversation sitting in boardrooms and building sites, in the Blue Barn where I record the podcast. Pattern never changes. Someone who's been doing the work describes themselves as stuck flat, not making progress. And when I ask them a few specific questions, it becomes clear they've covered more ground than they know. They can handle something now that would have floored them 6 months ago. They're making a decision in an afternoon that used to take them a week. They stop cancelling the meetings they used to dread. None of it looked like progress from the inside, because progress in the middle never does. But from the outside, it was unmistakable. That's the value of the witness. They're standing somewhere you can't stand. And it's sometimes all you need is for someone to say, with no particular drama, that what they're looking at is not a person standing still, but someone moving forward. I want to say something here that I've taken a long time to be sure of, because it cuts against a lot of what we're told about confidence. People I've worked with over the years who've built the most durable confidence, not the loudest or the most performed version of it, but the real steady, load-bearing kind, are almost never people who had a dramatic breakthrough moment. They're people who kept going through the middle, quietly, unspectacularly, often without anybody watching or applauding. And the confidence they built in that unremarkable stretch has a quality that the dramatic version doesn't, because it was earned in the absence of reward, in the gap between the beginning's buzz and the finish's satisfaction, and it belongs to them completely. That's what the boring middle gives you. If you go all the way through it, not a story, an identity. The settled knowledge that you can keep going when there's no particular reason to, and that in the end is the most useful thing confidence can possibly be. So your experiment this week is most deliberately unglamorous one of the season. First, find one thing you're in the middle. Not the one you've started, not the one you've already finished, the one you're in right now. And this week, show up to it once on a day when you don't feel like it, without raising the stakes, without restarting, without a plan for how to make it feel better. Just show up, do the modest version, and then write it in the evidence log. Not, I've nailed it, or I just went, because the middle bit doesn't need your best. It just needs you to keep going. And that one entry on that one flat day is the whole point. Let me leave you with this. The beginning of anything is easy to celebrate. The end makes a good story. But the confidence that lasts, the kind that doesn't depend on things going well or on anyone watching, is built in the middle, on the days when neither of those things is true. So if you're in the middle of something right now, and it feels like nothing is happening, and you're wondering whether to keep going, the answer almost certainly is yes. Not because the destination's guaranteed, but because showing up in the middle when there's no buzz and no reward and no one to tell is the most confidence-building thing a person can do. You're not stuck, you're not stalling. You're in the part right now that works, that builds your skill, that builds your confidence. Keep going. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I'm John M. Walsh, and I'll see you for the finale.